Thank you for joining us today for Meritorious Mentor Connect, presented by Magpul Industries. I'm your host, Catherine Kostreva, co-founder of Meritorious. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Jim Thomas, Digital Project Manager at Magpul Industries. Born in Cincinnati, Ohio, Jim graduated from Indiana University in 2011, commissioning as an armor officer in the United States Army. Jim served 9 years in a variety of roles in armor and reconnaissance organizations in Texas, Afghanistan, Korea, and Eastern Europe. After leaving active service in 2020, he joined Oracle as a cloud applications consultant in the customer experience division. He found his calling was ultimately at Magpul, joining the team in the summer of 2022 as the marketing team's digital project manager. Please join me in welcoming Jim Thomas. Thank you for joining us, sir.
All right, good afternoon to definitely those on the East Coast, and good morning to the rest of us in Central and back. Thank you so much, Catherine, for having me. Thank you, Scott, for speaking earlier. I wanted to kind of go over a couple things as a recently transitioned vet. I know we have a large swath of those who have transitioned a long time ago. We have military spouses, we have those thinking about it, and we have those who are currently in the process or even past and they're in their first career, maybe looking for a pivot in their second. So I'd kind of like to focus this 4 words I'd like to give you before I kind of go into me and truthfully the mistakes I made. So hopefully you don't have to make them. And they are organization, humility, vulnerability, and my most important, patience. So Catherine gave a brief on me, and I served for 9 years. Truthfully, 9/11 was my motivation from joining. Had a long history in New York with a grandmother, and watching that happen, everybody knows how they felt. But after 9 years, it was time for a change, time for personal change, time for professional change. I was coming off that change pretty highly motivated, had 2 very good commands, had a wonderful group of NCOs and officers I worked for, had some fantastic leaders. But ultimately, it was best for my family and my personal choice. And I'm sure most of you, in some point in time, could probably resonate with that, where it's time for a change. But with that change, I went in a little overconfident, and I'd like to talk to you about my overconfidence, where it kind of landed me in hot water, and what those thinking about transitioning or have transitioned, or trying to understand what it's like, it can help. So first off, if everybody remembers March of 2020. Where they were, that's when I exited active duty United States Army. So in-person interviews, actually had my very first in-person interview here with Magpul. Everything else was online. Good news for most of us all now is that most companies have figured out how to work the virtual online interviews, work sessions such as these, and figure all of that out. So good news is, for a lot of you who are thinking about transitioning, that has been solved, and it is very easy for you to identify where you want to go and how to go through. But even before you interview, the first thing, your very first introduction to a company, is your resume. And I want to focus on this first because it is extremely important. Most of us are used to the OER or the NCOER support forms that your soldiers will fill out and give you, and you'll have to brief. Most civilian employers aren't really quite sure how to read those. Some, if you get lucky, have seen it in the past and they understand what the terminology is, but for a lot of them, it looks like a foreign language. So having the ability to translate that in a methodology that allows employers to understand what your talents, capabilities, and strengths are is critical. If you would open another tab, one resource I wanted to mention for you that really helped me out with the transition of military terminology to better terminology is a tool called VMOC. And that is Victor Mike Oscar Charlie Kilo.com. It is a tool where you can upload a Word copy of your resume, and it'll give you feedback on your bullets, both qualitative and quantitative, the language used, your format, even your contact information, and how you post everything on a resume. Highly, highly helpful. I tried to do it myself for way too long and was unsuccessful. I wish I would have known about this sooner. But that's your first introduction to a company, is that resume. And the more organized, the more flow you have with that document, the more likely you're going to get that introductory interview. Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Appreciate you. With that though, with your resume, for those that are first starting out, my recommendation first, don't try to just make it one page and fit it all into one. Make a master. Write down all your accomplishments through all of your employment history. When you identify a firm or a company that interests you, research their values. What do they do? What do they provide? How do they serve their customer? What does success look like to them? All good ideas too to see if you'd be a good fit or if the culture is kind of right. Can't quite judge culture or leadership until you're in it, but it gives you an idea of what they stand for. With that, you can use that master resume and everything that you have on that, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10-page document of your employment history, and then start to identify those more pointed bullets that fit that job rec that you're looking for or wish to occupy. You're probably going to look at a lot of different jobs, and staying organized is key. At first, I was up to about 1 or 2 Excel docs of different firms and industries that I would do. Truthfully, during the COVID years, I quit filling it out after application 270. Really, vulnerability and humility that I spoke about earlier really started to kick in. But I was fortunate enough to get a call back from Oracle at the time and occupy a seat there for at least 18 months. But staying organized, making sure that your targeted resume to that employer was sent on a certain date, that your cover letters are, if they require one, are sent to the right employer, making sure you don't send a cover letter to Lockheed Martin when it was meant for BAE. But I don't know that guy, so I won't get into that. But anyway, stay organized to make sure that you are staying focused. And then if one of those roles contacts you, you have a quick reference to when the last contact was, what you have currently set. That way you can respond in a timely and orderly fashion and give them some support. So Scott earlier, my boss, talked a lot about networking and his success and how early he started with networking. I'm going to give you a different story, and that's the story of not networking and why I would highly recommend to highly network. Again, COVID anomaly, still trying to figure out the digital space and how to connect over the World Wide Web. But one thing with networking that I wasn't quite comfortable with was vulnerability. And that's a lot of people are going to ask you questions where, especially for former military, especially in leadership roles, you're supposed to be the strength of the organization, the backbone. And for people to ask penetrating and vulnerable questions can be a little difficult and wonder, why in the heck does this person want to know this about me? I'm not comfortable sharing that. A lot of interviewers and a lot of companies want to make sure and determine if you are the right fit. So going through that personal transition and being open and vulnerable with an employer is, I would argue, very important. I mean, probably some aspects of life that don't need to be shared, but understanding what can and can't be shared is also highly important. So being vulnerable and being having that humility with your work history and your thoughts, I would argue something I know personally I had to work on, but maybe someone in here, if you're feeling the same way, let me know. Happy to talk about it and how we overcame it. One thing of a note that I wanted to talk about is if any of you are transitioning or thinking about transitioning and secondary education or education is something that is a goal of yours, I wanted to give you a heads up. I am 6 months out from completing my MBA, but this process has started back in 2019. So it's been a long time coming. I would argue it's about a 2-year process if this is something that you would like to do, and that's 1 year for the application from the start date of the school of your choice. And that allows you to focus on, if you're not selected for a certain round, that your resume and your application keeps getting bumped from round to round, improve your chances of going to getting selected to the school of your choice. And then even back it up another year, 2-year process of studying for a GRE, a GMAT, whatever the requirements are for an application of that school, understanding them, and then being able to set yourself up for success by studying for it and getting the score that you either A, want or B, need to be considered for that school. Again, LinkedIn will be sent out. Happy to answer any questions on that as we go forward. Last thing I want to talk about, and Scott and everyone's mentioned it a little bit, is being vulnerable and patience. And there's a lot of variables and unknowns when you transition. It sounds pretty forward. You're used to having a plan. You're used to executing a plan. My first big note was things move a lot slower in the civilian world. Not a bad thing, kind of nice to slow things down. But having patience and grace, not only with the employer, your family, but most importantly, yourself. and allowing patients through the process, understanding there's going to be a lot of ambiguity, there's going to be a lot of variables, and it may not line up exactly as you want at first. For example, Oracle was a job, very happy to have one. I wasn't the right fit. Took me a long time to figure that out. Luckily, found an open rec one day and I'm in a good place right now. But have patience with yourself, have patience with your family. And my wife probably said it best, go figure. For those of you married, wife usually knows best, but have grace. Any questions or comments, I'm happy to answer. There's my LinkedIn will be posted at the end of this brief here. But Catherine, thank you very much and wanted to turn it back over to you.